Hello, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome to the Leo full moon forecast, where we go over the main astrological themes for the upcoming full moon in the sign of Leo and the following 2 weeks, or the last half of the lunar cycle that started actually with a Capricorn new moon. So, welcome back, everyone. A special shout out to those who support Catalyst Energies on Subscribestar. I appreciate you all so very much. And of course, to all of my subscribers, I'm just so close to hitting the 500 subscriber mark. And that's a big deal for me. Catalyst Energies has been around for, the end of 2019 is when I started this channel and my practice, and it's completely organic. I have no sponsorship. I have no monetization on any of the platforms that I am publishing on. Completely 100% organic and driven by subscribers and membership. So I want to thank all of you who have been around for this ride so far, and I'm going to be really excited when this video brings me up to and hopefully past the 500 subscriber mark, at least on YouTube, right? I'm on BitChute, obviously. That's been a pretty steady subscriber count, and Rumble and Odyssey, right? They're just, they are what they are, but I want to be available on a number of platforms so that people can find this content. So welcome definitely to the Leo sun and moon and rising folks. So the full moon forecast is going to focus on the Leo folks and what to expect, what are the main themes and transits going on for the full moon itself, and then the following 2 weeks to finish out the lunar cycle. And that's how I do it every time I do one of these new or full moon forecasts. We focus in and do the read on the particular sign that's represented by the new or full moon. Going to be a little different today, and I'm going to see how it goes. The first half, we're going to do some general information, some general trends about the full moon. I'm going to talk about the Beehive cluster. I'm going to talk about the Starseed connections to that particular location, because it's very connected into the full moon in terms of the zodiac degree. I'm going to go over a couple notable natal charts just to make some connections to this particular full moon and what it may represent. And then in the second half, we will go specifically into the forecast for the Leo folks with this full moon. Specifically, we look at the Leo rising chart. And if you're new to astrology, but you're here to learn, just keep in mind that it is your rising sign that you read a horoscope for. Most people think it's the sun sign, and yes, there's value to looking at your sun sign horoscope. Definitely value to looking at your moon sign horoscope. But when you read a horoscope, the astrologer is writing it based on the rising sign, and that puts all of the current astrology in particular houses, and that's how they come up with the horoscope. So this will be also kind of, a learning tool, right, in terms of how astrology works. So I'm very transparent about it, not trying to hide anything in terms of how I come to my conclusions, how I come to my forecasts. I don't make a lot of predictions necessarily, because I feel like that the astrology and what it sets up are potentials, and it's up to us and our own free will to make decisions, to take action, or just to have a relationship with the potentials that are provided. So we're going to, like I said, we're going to talk about the Beehive cluster. We're going to talk about some notable charts that are related to this upcoming full moon. As I said, a little bit of Starseed content just to give people an idea of what to expect in that realm. And then I am going to share with you some changes to my subscriber content, some things, new things that are being offered, and give you a little bit of direction in case you are interested in what goes along with being a monthly subscriber through Subscribestar. And of course, everything you need is in the description box. You can email me directly at catalystenergies@gmail.com. My website is also linked in the description box, and then the link to the Subscribestar profile, and you get all the information you need there as well. So without further ado, let's just get into it. Now, behind me here, you may be noticing that there is this image of the Cancer constellation. And as a Leo person, maybe, and of course, if you're not a Leo person, this doesn't necessarily apply to you. But if you are a Leo person and you're here and you're like, what does Cancer have to do with me? I'm a Leo. Well, you would be right, because the ruling planet of the sign of Leo is the sun. And sidebar, something I'm going to talk way more about when I do the Catalyst Weekly Astrology Report. One of the features of monthly subscription is a weekly astrology report that is directly sent to my subscribers, comes out every Wednesday. We go into much more detail in terms of the moon transits, get much more into the minutia of the week's astrology. But I will be talking about this issue in more detail tomorrow. But as a Leo, if you are in fact a Leo person, and the ruling planet is the sun for you in term, well, it's not a planet, the ruling body in astrology for the Leo is the sun. Well, you may have noticed that the sun, after at least a week if not more of very quiet activity, lots of sunspots, definitely some flaring, but in the last 2 days it has been popping off and sending CMEs towards us pretty consistently. So I'm going to talk a lot more about that. It's really important, in my opinion, that you understand the basics of solar weather, of stellar physics. And I know that astrophysics, as it is given to us currently in the mainstream, is definitely not complete, and there may be things that are completely wrong about it, but understanding the basics is really important so that you can determine what out there is solar flare clickbait, because I assure you there is tons of it, right? There are tons of accounts on social media that are attempting to elicit fear every time the sun burps out a flare. So if you understand the mechanics of it, then you understand when it's important to take precaution, to be aware, etc. But one thing I will say, Leo, since the sun is your ruling body, it has definitely been burping out, if more, some higher energy solar flares. They are sending CMEs, coronal mass ejection, meaning that plasma is coming our way. It will interact with the magnetosphere into the ionosphere, and it will cause geomagnetic storms, right? So like I said, I'm going to talk more about that with my subscribers on the weekly astrology that's coming out. But one thing I will point out here, and then we'll get back to the main content of the video, is something, and there have been lots of very large quakes there over the last 2 days. There's been some significant quakes happening. But one thing I have noticed, and let's see if I can bring up an image. I'm going to look here and see. No, I didn't bring it up, but that, something that you can go explore and research for yourself is the Schumann resonance has been pretty stable throughout all of this. And I anticipated that there may be a strong amplification as these CMEs are rolling in, and that certainly could be the case. But boy, there's a lot of seismic activity without any real amplification of the Schumann. So I think that is a piece of data worth putting a pin in right now in terms of understanding what the Schumann resonance is, when it's amplifying, what that means, because that is a whole other, I could make a career out of debunking the clickbait ascension narrative about the Schumann resonance. But I prefer not to. I love doing what I do, which is astrology. I am in the healing arts. I'm a professional and licensed massage therapist. I have been for multiple decades. I am a Reiki master. I've been that for multiple decades as well. That's where I want my attention to be focused. But I do have a background in science and stellar physics and astrophysics to, a basic degree. So I like to be able to talk to people about this. Anyway, sidebar over. Let's get into the specifics of this upcoming full moon, which by the way, will be on the 25th of January, which is in 2 days. It will be exact. So again, as a Leo person, you may be like, well, what does the Cancer constellation have to do with me? Well, good question. I am going to share some information with you about the particular degree that this full moon is in, which is in the zodiac sign of Leo, but it's also in the area of the constellation of Cancer, and the degree The very degree is in relation to a specific star cluster in the Cancer constellation called the Beehive cluster, or M44. That's its Messier designation. So let's start there, and that's why I have this image up. Now, something to consider here, Leo, as a sun-ruled individual, is that the sun and the moon are really, in terms of our experience here on this planet, because Luna is our moon, they're inseparable from each other, and that is the same in astrology. The sun and the moon in astrology represent relationship dynamics, so they're kind of inseparable from each other. Obviously the sun can and would exist without Luna operating around us, but it's in the experience of the lunar object that we call the moon, right, or Luna, that we experience relationship. The moon, and since we are talking about a full moon in the constellation of Cancer, it's important to pay attention to what is going on with all of these dynamics, right? Because as a Leo person, you tend to be very dramatic and very creative and exuberant and confident, and all of these Leo traits. You know, you got the heart of the lion, right? That is what Leo represents. And that is the fifth house in astrology. And when we get to the actual chart itself, I'll point those things out so you have an actual frame of reference. Again, if you're still new to astrology and still learning. Well, the house before that, the fourth house, is the Cancer house. And what rules the sign of Cancer? Well, it's the moon, right? And isn't it interesting that in the astrology chart, the zodiac, the astrological wheel, it is the fourth house ruled by the moon, that is Cancer, that comes before the sun and comes before the fifth house. That's interesting. The moon represents our emotional landscape, our internal intuitive channel. It represents what's going on in the inside, the living soul in every moment, responding to and adapting to the world around us. The sun and the fifth house, on the other hand, represent the way the ego and the personality expresses itself, often in a creative fashion, okay? So, Leo, you can't really separate yourself from the sign of Cancer as much as you'd like to, because it is the shining of the sun and the reflection of that light from the moon that reveals and illuminates what often is hidden within us. And every full moon represents that. It represents the illumination, the revelation, the culmination truly of the beginning of the lunar cycle, which is the new moon. So full moons are also beginnings, but they are beginnings in full consciousness. The aspects that are often hidden, that are subconscious, that are more in the darkness within ourselves, right? Where our personal power comes from, where our private life really resides, is highlighted. It's illuminated. It is illumined for all of us to see and to basically be aware of. And it's the rest of the lunar cycle that is, well, it requires that we take that illumination and consciously apply it to the fulfillment of the intentions of the new moon, right? And so every time there's a new moon, there's like a seed point of an intention that we can set that really steers the growth and development of whatever that new moon represents, right? So, and for those of you who are very familiar with astrology, you may be astrologers yourself, or you are beyond a novice in astrology, you already know all of these things. And so you can also be a really good resource in terms of filling in gaps in the comment section. And certainly when we have conversations in our private Telegram group, that's another subscriber thing that is offered. So this is the Cancer constellation, the Beehive cluster. It is a cluster of stars. Again, the Messier designation is M44. That's really important for what I'm going to talk about later. Is in this constellation. So if we were to look at, and this is what I'm going to show here, we're going to look at the living sky. We're going to look at the actual representation of the sky at the time of, roughly at the time of the full moon, about 12 hours before, at least from where I'm standing, because the moon will have already set by the time it is technically full. So I'm going to show it to you about 12 hours before, so you can see how close the full moon is actually to M44, or the Beehive cluster. So if I bring this up, here is my astronomy software. It came with my telescope. This is an indispensable resource. You can also get a free astronomy software to download onto your device or onto your whatever your device is, called Stellarium. It's free. It does take up a lot of space and a lot of processing power, but it is a very good tool if you want to be able to track things in terms of the actual living sky. So you can see here that here is our full moon as of the 25th, roughly noon Eastern Standard Time, and you can see here's the constellation of Cancer. Here is the boundary or the area of the constellation of Cancer, the moon being the ruling planet, or the ruling body, the ruling body of Cancer in its constellation. So every time there's a moon in Cancer, whether it's the zodiac sign or the constellation, and there is a difference between these two designations. Western or tropical astrology is basing it on an equal 360-degree dome around us, and each zodiac sign is an equal 30 degrees partitioned around. It's very precise, it's very geometric, and it's unchanging even as the sky changes. Sidereal astrology, and more of the lunar-based astrologies, Vedic astrology, Chinese astrology, Arabic astrology, Mayan astrology, they're very lunar-based, and they are focused on the actual position of the luminaries, which is the sun and the moon, the planets, the stars, the asteroids in the actual sky itself. So they both have their place, and they both look at different things from different perspectives. So anyway, the moon is very powerful, even just being in the constellation of Cancer at a full moon. But it's also in direct alignment with, as you can see here, M44, the Beehive cluster. So this is going to be a very, very powerful full moon. And for those of you who have been following me, or certainly if you are already getting the weekly astrology, we've been talking about what this is going to be leading up to, because we had the new moon start in Capricorn, but now we have a full moon in Leo. And when you have a full moon in Leo, that means the sun is in Aquarius. And so Leo, your ruling planet, is opposite of your sign. It's at its weakest position, as it is every time at this year, or every year at this time is what I meant to say. So that's something to consider as well, Leo, is that your ruling body of the sun is at its detriment. It's at its weakest. It's in the sign opposite of its home or rulership. And I think that that's something that's worth keeping under your hat for now, because the tendency for the Leo person being ruled by the sun is to default back to, how do I express myself? What is the full authentic expression of my heart? And the sun in Aquarius is at its weakest, and so it's that expression is really much more of a reflection of the collective and social consciousness, right? If Leo is the performer, right, then Aquarius is the audience. And oftentimes when you are more identified with the audience or with the collective as a whole, it can be very difficult to come around and tap back into your individual authentic expression. And this full moon, I do feel like, is something that when we get into the actual play-by-play, Leo, and look at all the transits, you're going to see that there's a ton of connections to Uranus. Uranus stations direct. There's going to be lots of connections to Uranus, right? Mercury, Mars, Venus is now in Capricorn, actually, as of today. This is the 23rd that I'm recording this. They're all going to be in a trine, a 120-degree angle with Uranus, the ruling planet of Aquarius. So I think what will be revealed, Leo, about especially Leo rising people, but just anybody with strong Leo in the chart with the full moon, the relativity of social values, the idea that where we've been and where we are going, and the challenge and the dissonance between those two things is actually important to where we are going. And that is something worth hanging on to emotionally, internally, subconsciously, as we move forward, and as we're all truly identified with the frequency of the whole, and this and social consciousness as a whole, because that's what Aquarius really represents. Okay, so I just wanted to show you how close the full moon is to this particular star cluster M44. Okay, so we'll go back here to we're going to go back here to our crab here. And what I'd like to do is also, while I have the crab up, I would love to share with you actually some information about M44, or the Beehive cluster, or the Manger as it's called. It's an open star cluster in the Cancer constellation. Now, this information is coming from a website called Astrology King, one word, astrologyking.com. Great resource for fixed stars and constellations and the astrology of those particular stars and constellations. So I'm just going to read a couple things from this website and give you an idea of what this star cluster has historically really meant in terms of astrology. So it represents the Manger, or the Beehive cluster, or the Beehive, right? And so a lot of times when you look at these fixed star astrology, like in ancient astrology, you're looking back to Ptolemy and things like that. There's always a really negative and fear-mongering type of association, but there's also a really positive one. So I'm going to read both of them so that you have a fuller picture of what this star cluster would represent if it was, I don't know, in your natal chart, for instance. And I would say if you do have anywhere from 5 to 9 degrees of Leo in terms of your sun, moon, or rising, but even anything in your chart, you want to pay attention, because this is going to be in reference to that. So, mentioned by Ptolemy, it causes blindness and disgrace and disease, but also adventure and industry and fertility, right? And this is connected actually to where we're coming up to the Chinese New Year and the Year of the Dragon, and that's something we'll talk about in a little bit. I just want to make those connections just right off the bat. It makes the person fortunate, though liable to loss through other people. Oh, that's interesting. When we have all this Aquarius energy where you're really inseparable from everyone else, because it's one collective resonance of the people, right? So those are some things about M44, or the Beehive cluster. It represents, again, insolent or adventurous, impulsive and restless, inclined towards dissipation, fortunate but liable to loss through others, right? Eyesight problems. These are some standard cohesive themes with this particular star cluster. Also known as the Beehive or the Manger, it threatens mischief and blindness, and is said to cause disease and disgrace. If the nebula is not visible in a clear sky, it presages a violent storm. Well, this is interesting because the nebula is, at least where I'm at, over here on the east coast of the United States, it is not visible in the night sky because it's setting at night. I think that's really interesting. Now, it has been a bad omen, right? It designates a part of the zodiac which since ages past has had a bad omen. And I think that is, again, this is not about fear. This is about just sharing with you what has historically and traditionally been read about this particular designation, this star cluster, right? And so, and in Chinese astrology, it's given the name the spirit of the ancestors. Okay, that seems a lot less outrageous and dangerous, right? And so it's about between 500 and 600 light years from us, and it's easily seen on a good night. Now, like I said, you can't see it's setting at in the evening when, at least where I'm at here on the east coast of the U.S. So, but it's about the size of the Pleiades. So imagine looking at the Pleiades, which is very visible in the night sky right now where I'm at, and then the Beehive cluster would be something like that, a star cluster that you can see with the naked eye on a good clear night, right? So I'm trying to find here. I'm reading through this and I'm looking through and I'm like, are there any qualities here that are like actually that are actually positive that I can point to? Let's see here. The busy atmosphere of the Beehive presents the idea as a base or a home base in which something can operate. That's also really important. I want you to put a pin in that. But the inclusion of the lunar quality, because it is in the Cancer constellation, and then you have the full moon right here that's coming up, it really emphasizes a moody and unpredictable quality along with it, okay? And so it does show capacity for cooperation with others, right? So you imagine like what's going on in a beehive, for instance, and the secret of much of their success in life is with this capacity for cooperation, right? The idea that without all of the parts moving together in cohesion, there could be all of those negative things happening, but if things come together and there is this capacity for cooperation, there is a lot of success. And this particular beehive cluster rules right below the right eye. So that's very interesting. The right eye, not the left eye, but the right eye. So you can go to astrologyking.com, or you can just type in beehive cluster into a search engine, do your own research. But those are some of the things that really stuck out to me about this particular star cluster. Now, I will say in my own work, working with people who are starseeds, and just as a caveat here, I am not in any way endorsing the idea exclusively that starseed means that your soul is from this star system. It is way deeper than that. It has much more to do with the astrology and the frequency of light coming from these fixed stars as opposed to that particular mythology. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying that the starseed readings don't necessarily come along with the expectation that I'm saying, hey, you're from the beehive cluster. There's something much deeper here. And I have seen this particular designation in my clients' charts over and over in specific people who are just people of note, right? And we're going to look at, again, especially one particular chart. And if you do have this in your chart, and then I share with you one particular chart and actually a location that I'm going to share with you that's related to this star cluster, don't get freaked out. But it's important that you know, because I assure you, it's already known if you have this designation in your chart and has been factored into your unique algorithm that is tailored to you in your life, okay? So the more you know, right? The more you know, the wiser you can be if you can be. Knowledge is not the same as wisdom, but knowledge can lead to wisdom if you have critical thought and are willing to consider all aspects of that knowledge. So, like I said, the starseed thing, like if you have, I would say anywhere from 5, 6, 7, 8 degrees of Leo in your chart, you are a starseed with this particular designation, okay? Now, and I want you to think again, beehive cluster, manger, and specifically M44, 4 plus 4 equals, okay? All right. So let's see here. Let's look at some of those notable charts, actually, and then we're going to get into a little bit of a PSA real quick right in the middle, and then we're going to get into the play-by-play forecast for the Leo full moon, which I'm sure many of you are here for, and you're like, just tell me what to expect with this full moon, right? Really, I want to teach you how to read the astrology for yourself and trust your own intuition, your own connection to source or the great spirit, and make your own forecast for yourself, right? I mean, so much of where we're at, and I'm going to get on a soapbox here for just a second, but so much of where we're at still is people just kind of ping ponging and just all over the place with who do I listen to? Who do I listen to? Well, maybe you learn to start listening to yourself, right? And if you understand the information, if you understand patterns, and you have the capacity for pattern recognition, and you have the capacity for critical thought, you don't have to worry about who do I trust, because eventually you will figure out who's trustworthy and who is actually out to influence you, right? Okay, so off the soapbox. Let's start looking at some charts, okay? So, and I'm going to close out a couple things here once I can. Multitasking is not my strong suit, I have to say, especially in this particular, and anybody who's been with me knows for sure that is what's going on. The multitasking while I'm recording or presenting is a little bit of a challenge for me. So we're going to look at some notable, not only Leo charts, but a location in particular. And Leo, I will tell you, and even if you're here just to learn astrology or just because you want to get a general idea of what's going on here, you can't separate Leo from Aquarius. That's how the entire structure of astrology works. That is what is embedded in the lunar cycle with the sun. It is about relationship. Everything is about relationship in astrology, especially the lunar cycle. That is what it represents from beginning to end, is the nature of relationship, and how we feel on the inside and how we express ourselves and externalize that and externalize our personality with the power of our internal emotional landscape, right? Because it's emotion that really is the ticket here, right? Emotion and feeling is the root system. Ooh, the root. I want you to pay attention to that. The root. Okay. And in astrology, as we're going to look at the chart, and many of you already know this, at least in the way that I describe it, that fourth house cusp, the nadir, that is your root system, right? That is the thing that roots you to the world around you, roots you to and stabilizes you to the core of who you are and where you belong and where your loyalties lie. So the root, I want you to pay attention to that, okay? So let's see what pops up first in terms of a chart. Okay, this is a very notable chart here. So this is, let me make this a little smaller. Okay, and this is from astro.com or Astrodienst, instead of intelligence, Astrodienst. This is a great website. This is the one I primarily use to cast my charts, right? I have everything, everybody's chart saved here. It has an incredible amount of resources, incredible amount for an online program and an online platform. This is very comprehensive. I have been doing astrology now professionally since 2019. And practicing it well before that, and I have still managed to not buy the software. I'm just really stubborn about certain things like that, especially when you have these types of platforms. Anyway, so astro.com if you're interested at all in a platform that allows you to cast charts. So this is the chart for Aleister Crowley, right? You can see that not only is he a Leo, but he is a Leo conjunct the Beehive cluster. So in terms of the exact zodiac degree where the Beehive cluster is, as of now, it's between 7 and 8 degrees of Leo, right? And accounting for precession, that is going to move a degree every 72 years, okay? So, very close to this Beehive cluster that Crowley, his ascendant, right? His rising sign. So if he were, we'd be reading for his chart right now, and his full moon would be the full moon would be pretty much right on his ascendant, okay? So this is a very notable Leo rising chart connected to the Beehive cluster. This is really important. This is not random. but I'm not going to like dish it out to you. I mean, there's things that you may want to put together on your own. I'm just pointing out the facts here that this is Aleister Crowley's natal chart. Something else, and lots of Libra, by the way. Lots of Libra. He is a sun in Libra with Venus conjunct. Venus would be his ruling planet as a sun in Libra, and then the sun is also his chart ruler. So it's a very, and in his fourth house of home, family, the fourth house, his root system. Interesting. But I just wanted to point out this chart. We could spend all day here on this person's chart and how it is relevant to so many things right now. But it's this particular thing that I want to point out, which is the Leo rising designation that is conjunct this Beehive cluster. Okay, really, really important. Another notable chart that we're going to look at in particular, and this actually came, I planned on sharing this, but then it came up in a chat, like a chat group on Telegram, quite randomly, and I love when that happens because I already planned on looking at this. This chart is for Isaac Cappy. Let's see if I can't show it to you. There we go. So this is Isaac Cappy's chart, February 17th, 1977. He was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And which is a strange place in and of itself, but that's a different topic. Oh boy. Now I don't have his birth time, and so it has the local time as set to noon. So just know that the moon transits about 2.5 degrees every hour, and so depending on where the actual time he was born, and of course I don't have his rising sign because we don't have his birth time, so and that's what designates the house system for any individual. The eastern horizon at the time you were born is where your rising sign starts, your first house, and then everything is designated beyond that. So we don't have that, but we do know that his moon was likely in Aquarius, and it's very possible that he actually was born on an Aquarius new moon at 30 degrees Aquarius. Again, another little sidebar. I didn't bring up the chart because I've talked about it a lot, but another very notable Leo rising chart is Donald Trump at 30 degrees Leo on his ascendant, which means his descendant or his seventh house would be 30 degrees Aquarius. Very interesting. But not as interesting as Crowley's chart with his ascendant right at that Beehive cluster, okay? And that's going to matter when I share the next chart. But I also wanted to bring this up because Cappy has a Mars-Mercury conjunction opposite the Beehive cluster, right? Opposite of it in Aquarius. Now, a Mars-Mercury conjunction in the natal chart definitely gives a very quick mind, a sharp tongue, rapid reflexes, and anybody who listened to any of his stuff and followed what he was up to when he was really outing a lot of what was going on in terms of trafficking in Hollywood because of his connection to all of those things. He, very enthusiastic, very courageous, very direct way of expressing himself, can win admiration in certain types of politics, business, the military. However, this direct means of communication can lead to arguments and hostility in more personal relationships, okay? And there's a very impulsive and aggressive side, which is Mars in Aquarius. You know who else has Mars in Aquarius? Elon Musk does. But I haven't looked at his chart in terms of this yet, so that would be interesting to see where his Mars in Aquarius is. Is it opposite also the Beehive cluster? Huh. That's interesting. We'll have to look into that. So very direct, very quick-witted, quick mind, rapid reflexes in terms of his communication at the social level, right? At the collective level of the people, right? But it was in his personal life that he probably had a lot of problems. And his more intimate relationships, there was probably a tendency to get into arguments and cause problems, right? And of course we know what happened to Cappy at the end, and there's still some, I think there's still a lot of doubt as to the official story, and I guess we're never going to know. But the thing that really strikes me is the fact that he has this Mercury-Mars conjunction opposite the Beehive cluster, okay? And you can't separate Leo from Aquarius. There's nothing you can do about that. And he also has Saturn in Leo. It's not exactly conjunct the Beehive cluster. It's out of orb as far as I can tell. But he does have this fire trine with Venus, Neptune, and Saturn as well. This grand fire trine. That would just in itself be interesting to look at as well. And then in fact, he's got a mystic rectangle if you start to really look at it. Okay, I don't want to get too much into Cappy's chart. I just am pointing out these particular connections to the Beehive cluster. Now, what we're going to look at here is the last of these charts, and then Leo, I promise we're going to get into your forecast, but these are important things related to this particular position of this full moon because it's showing a lot of what may be coming up, okay? Everybody's got their role to play. Now, what we're looking at here is a chart for a location that was at a particular time when it was officially designated. As you can see, this is a town called Racine, Wisconsin. Okay, Racine, Wisconsin is a little town. It is on the I-94, right? It is, gosh, it's only like, 20 miles north of Kenosha, right? It's in Wisconsin. Racine actually means the root. Strangely enough, we were talking about Cancer and the root, right? And the nadir. So in the chart, it would be down here. This designation is the fourth house cusp. It's the nadir. You can see the Cancer glyph is right here, and this is the root, okay? Now, you can go to Wikipedia and find all this information in terms of Racine, Wisconsin, when it was discovered, in terms of pioneers, the indigenous people, all of that stuff. Now, there are two dates that came out. The first date is when Wisconsin joined the Union. Racine was officially incorporated into that state in August of 1848. Wow, and there's no date. It just says August 1848. But boy, oh boy, look at that Mercury-Jupiter conjunction. Where? Conjunct the Beehive cluster. That's so interesting. Very, very interesting. That was when Racine was incorporated into, officially incorporated as a town in the state of Wisconsin that officially joined the Union in 1848. Now, we could also, unpack lots of stuff around the charts around this time as well, but that's something really, really striking. Now, the other part of this that I want to point out here is that it was first incorporated as a village in 1841. So if we were to go back those years and look at what was happening roughly around the same time, where the sun, at more like the beginning of August, when the sun is actually conjunct the Beehive cluster. So if you look at the particular, let's see here. Yes, go 2 weeks. So you go 2 weeks. Oh, that's interesting. The sun is conjunct the south node of the moon at 9 degrees Leo. Very, very close to that Beehive cluster once again. And this is when the town or the village of Racine was officially incorporated as a village, right? And so again, it is the indigenous word and the French word as well. Racine means the root, okay? So you may be wondering why I'm bringing up this particular town, and there are a lot of reasons, but I'm just going to leave it there for now. So if you know, then you know, and if you don't know, perhaps it might be worth it to, go on Twitter or X, for instance, and just start typing in Racine and seeing what comes up and what the connections are there. And if we were to, look at a map of where Racine is, which is what I'm going to do right now, just to give you an idea. And this, I tend to, once I can see things visually, that tends to help me in some cases. So if we were to type in Racine, Wisconsin, okay, and some of you know about the work around interstates, the connection between interstates and water. So you see that it's very close to Milwaukee. Can you see this? I'm sorry. Here's Kenosha. You remember what happened in Kenosha right here. Milwaukee's here. What is this? This is Lake Michigan, I believe. It is Lake Michigan. And anybody that knows more than I do, feel free to, drop something in the comments about this. Isn't there something really outrageous that was found in Lake Michigan, the bottom of Lake Michigan? Something like a pyramid or some sort of really, really old artifact that defies things. Also, look, Racine is smack dab in the middle of Milwaukee and Chicago. Again, right on I-94, right? Here's Madison, Wisconsin. Excuse me. And boy, only 60 miles from UW-Whitewater. That is really, really close to Racine. So anyway, I just wanted to bring those things up for the people that are following this and pointing out the particular connections to the Beehive cluster in terms of astrology, okay? All right, my friends, as promised, let's get into the full moon forecast for the Leo folks, okay? So if you're not a Leo and you're not interested in this in any way, this is a good time to just kind of shut down and move on. But, there's a lot to be learned even by looking at astrology of a chart or a sign that's not yours, especially if you are here to learn more about astrology. And the best way to learn astrology is to do it, right? It is to sit down and do it. It's like learning a language. If you don't use it every day, you're not going to learn the language. So, and that's what I did. That's how I learned. And I didn't take any classes from people. I have no formal training. I just sat down and started doing it every single day. And now, 7 years later or whatever, from that moment, here I am and giving readings and having a fairly, prominent practice. I mean, it's not necessarily like making me rich and famous, but it definitely is sustainable. Right. And if you're a client of mine or you're part of our, membership or monthly subscriber, feel free to let people know what this work has done for you, especially your subscription, because I think certainly with any small business, whatever it is, word of mouth and reviews from satisfied clients and customers is by far the best publicity you're ever going to get. So I don't know. I just thought that would be an interesting thing to see in the comments if you're feeling so inclined. All right, Leo, here is your chart for this upcoming full moon. As you can see, as with all full moons, the full moon is in your sign. It's in the first house for the Leo rising. The sun is in your seventh house. The seventh house is who you are in relationship. The bottom of the chart is individual identity and expression. The top of the chart is social identity and expression. So as your ruling body, the sun is in your seventh house. You are identified, you're sustained, you're creatively motivated to express yourself in the context of your one-on-one relationships. But it's in those relationships that something about you, who you are, the subjective personality you project into the world is going to be revealed, right? And over the next 2 weeks, it is your responsibility, Leo, if you choose to accept, to take that revelation, that illumination, and apply it to quite objectively and consciously to whatever intentions you may have set when it comes to the new moon, which in the sign of Capricorn was in the sixth house. And I always say, and this is my own thing here, the sixth house is the house where we get our shit together, right? The sixth house is the very unglamorous, put one foot in front of the other, daily grind. That is what really makes a person reach their full potential, right? So the sixth house is about your works, your labors, your service, right? It is about your daily routine. What are you doing every day in terms of your health, your wellness, your healing, right? A lot of times the sixth house usually initiates crisis in people because that's where personal transformation, it doesn't come when things are easy and you're getting your way. It comes when things are difficult and when you are challenged. And the sixth house is traditionally Virgo. So it's very much about the functionality of your physical resources, whether that's, the physiology of your body and your healing, whether it's about your day-to-day activities in terms of how do I put my resources to work to actually make myself a better person. It's about being disciplined. It's about being meticulous and organized. That's all the sixth house. But if you really want to break it down to something we can all understand, the sixth house is where we are forced to get our shit together. And you can see, Leo, you got a lot going on there. Now, Pluto has just moved out of this house for you and the sign for the Leo rising, right? It's been years of Pluto really just destroying everything that you thought about this and had been doing in order to pave the way for regeneration and new growth in this area. Now you have the personal planets of Mercury, Venus, and especially Venus as of very recently, and Mars, which is exalted in Capricorn, loves to be in Capricorn. It's not its home, but it's close, right? We all love to put our personal energy and output into goals and ambitions and being industrious, right? That's the Capricorn nature. So Leo, the new moon was seed point of new service, new disciplines, new practices, reestablishing your contract with yourself about, okay, how am I going to put my resources to work with my ability to analyze, to crunch the numbers, to, like I said, put one foot in front of the other, right? Where the rubber meets the road. And it is not, and for a Leo person who is often very glamorous, very dramatic, very much out there as a performer, right? And these are all wonderful things, right? Lots of Leo people are, center stage because they emit that solar quality that we all have, but just in who they are. So naturally, it's in the day-to-day minutia, right? The practicing day in and day out of something that can be very difficult for all of us. And for the Leo rising person in particular, as you can see, the fact that it's Capricorn is just like, you really put your nose to the grindstone and get something done, something that's more than yourself, contributing something that is overall creating a structure for the social good, right? So whatever Pluto has been doing since 2008 for you is finally ended now that Pluto is in Aquarius, and you can these personalized planets, right? Again, Mercury, Mars, Venus, they're coming up now, and they are making it a lot more personally accessible, right? In terms of these particular practices, whatever they are for you. It could be healing, it could be instituting a new practice, it could be different daily work routines, whatever it is. It's now something that is much more personally accessible and something that you are personally involved with now, after Pluto has basically come through and just destroyed everything in order to make way for something new to grow, right? And that's a big part of this full moon, I think, for you, Leo, is the emotional recognition that you are still you, regardless if you are on the conservative end and became more progressive, perhaps you were on the progressive end and you became more conservative. It's the relativity of these values that is showing, I think, all of us, but certainly the Leo person in particular, that you have not ceased to be who you are because of this transition, right? So this is where the full moon starts, is on the 25th with this, and you have a lot of stack up in the sixth house. So you're really getting stuff done, I think, and you're really feeling the drive, the motivation, and certainly with Mercury here, really thinking very seriously about these things. And now that Venus is here in Capricorn, I mean, she is the crone in Capricorn. Venus is the grandmother. She's very wise and has put her time in and is an elder, in a lot of ways in Capricorn. And so it's like the experience of Venus in Capricorn really takes the edge off in a lot of ways too. Maybe will remind you of everything that you've gone through and the value of that experience, of life experience, that then you can apply to this new set of whatever it is, your works, your labors, your service, new disciplines, new practices, whatever it is you can that's going to allow you to reconstitute yourself. This is the sixth house, okay? and to have this revelation that social values are relative, and in fact the dissonance is kind of important, um, is a big part of this, right? Now, I will say before the moon is full, it will be opposite Pluto at the first degree of Leo and Aquarius. And this is often, a moon opposite Pluto often causes inner turmoil and relationship drama. And you can have very intense feelings. And considering the fact that Pluto is in your seventh house of relationship, of one-on-one relationship, there can be some intensity here. And the power is really situated in terms of the form of the relationship, but you yourself might be feeling this emotional, like, aha moment about who you are and who you've been and who you're becoming. So there may be some real drama around that, and your feelings can intensify a lot. And there are a lot of different feelings that go along with the moon opposite Pluto, right? Hopelessness, fear, obsessiveness, and jealousy, right? And the best thing you can do is share your feelings with someone you actually trust, and not like internalize them and hold them, because you can really nosedive into depression in a situation like this, especially if you feel like, wow, that didn't actually, all of that energy that I put into that particular position, it didn't even mean anything, right? And I would argue that that's not the case. You're like, again, you're not any less of a person because of it. Now, let me share with you 6 degrees Leo, 5 to 6 degrees Leo in terms of Sabian symbols, right? The need to transcend our subservience to whatever social fashion is there, right? And it's always changing. The pageant of social values is always changing. As the ideals of human relationship change, right? And they move from one generation to the next. And so the symbol itself, the image, is like you have this conservative woman that is being confronted by the progressive woke girl, right? And there is this clash seemingly, right? And one generation facing in the next an antithetic picture. And this is coming from the astrological mandala, by the way. The confrontation may lead to great bitterness, yet it should show us the impermanence of what most of society impresses upon our collective mentality. Do you understand what I'm saying here, right? Is the tendency here is to be very identified with the nature of the relationship, and if that dissonance and that bitterness defines that relationship, it's going to be very difficult to have this emotional revelation of like, oh, those things are just relative. But don't you think we really need this right now? I'm just saying. It shows us the impermanence of all of these things. The human heart, in what it represents and what it actually is the thing that is permanent, right? And it's everything that dresses it up that is impermanent. And I think that this is an important thing to consider. And yeah, it can be very destabilizing in many ways, right? And not everybody's going to really deal very well with this revelation, because they've put everything into that position as if it's permanent, and having the revelation that it's not. And in fact, all of these things are like wearing a costume. Ooh, that's going to be hard. Now, let me share with you what 6 degrees Aquarius represents, and then we're going to get into the play-by-play here of the next 2 weeks, right? The idea here is that 6 degrees of Aquarius is a masked figure performs ritualistic acts in a mystery play. Now, I know that probably evokes a very particular set of images and maybe the groups that are doing things like this. And I would say that's not irrelevant. That is actually really relevant when you go back to the Beehive cluster, when you go back to the designation of M44, when you go to what Racine may represent and what's going on there, that the involvement in long established patterns of activity aiming at the release of collective power. It's something more. It's transpersonal, right? It's transpersonal. So how could this be upsetting? Well, you may think that you have actually been taking a position that has been permanent, but really it's the dissonance of seemingly permanent but really not positions that is actually playing a role in something that's aiming to release collective power. Ooh, It's not easy, right? When you feel like, oh, I've just been led into this position thinking that these designations are actually real, and they're not, right? They're for something way, way more. Now, I'm not saying that there's no value to that in terms of an individual journey. I'm just saying here that if think about Cappy, for instance, right, and the fact that he had that Mars Mercury conjunction very close by in Aquarius, and we don't know what house it's in for him because we don't have his birth time, but think about how he may have from the very beginning been pulled into the entire thing that he was part of, only at the very end to have realized that he had been misled and fooled and was being used. And that's my personal opinion. I think that was the thing he realized at the very end, that he had been used and misled the whole time. And he spoke a lot of truth, and he got very, very close. But I think in the end, it was all orchestrated and curated, and I do think he killed himself, and I think it's because he was brought to that place to realize that, oh, none of from his perspective anyway. That's just something that came up today in a different chat, and that's looking at the astrology, I feel like that is very likely. So that could be very uncomfortable to be like, oh, this is something more than my individual connection, right? This is releasing long established power through very long established patterns, things that are beyond just the individual lifespan, for instance, right? So this is going to be a very interesting full moon. Now consider that the full moon period will last for about 2.5 days. The first 45 degrees of the full moon, right, from 180 degrees to would it be 215 degrees, that is technically still the full moon period. So during that time is the time to be like, oh, it is the relationship between these things that is revealing something about me and about how I project myself into the world, my subjective experience of personality, how I feel. Especially if you are a moon Leo person, that's really going to hit hard. So that's the full moon in and of itself, right? So the next big thing that I want to talk about is within 2 days, okay? And this is when Uranus, which rules Aquarius, is going to station direct. And it's the last of the outer planets that's been retrograde that it's going to station, right? And of course, in my experience, every time Uranus has stationed direct or retrograde for that matter, there is usually something outrageous that happens. At least in my life, it's been that way. Something unexpected, something that, there's usually an injury, especially in Taurus, because Taurus is the second house, and of the many things it represents the structure of physicality, the body itself. And so every time Uranus is stationed direct or retrograde, something along those lines usually happens to someone immediately around me. So unfortunately, I'm kind of expecting it, but hopefully it's not going to be that way. But the 27th is when Uranus stations, Uranus ruling the Leo 7th house, right, of Aquarius. And so also, as this full moon is still very much in effect at this time, Uranus stations. Now, Leo rising, Uranus and Jupiter for that matter, they're both in your 10th house. This is your career. This is your public life. This is where your power is released into a contribution to solidify and crystallize a system that you're part of, institutions, a large family structure, a government, an economy. These are all social institutions, an industry that you're part of, right? And this is why the 10th house is often mundanely considered the career, because it's not your works. That's the 6th house. This is what you do every day at work, for instance, right? And there's a lot of energy here, including Mars and Mercury coming into conjunction, just like, Isaac Cappy's natal chart, Mars and Mercury in a conjunction. Different degree, but still, there's these parallels that are just popping out now. It's so interesting. Uranus is going to station direct. I would say, Leo, that when this happens, not only in your career area, Will there be rapid or unexpected about face in terms of resources and value and structure in terms of your career? But since Uranus rules the seventh house, which is where the sun is right now, it's also going to influence and impact the nature of the one-on-one relationship. Now, this can be a marriage or a domestic partnership. This can be the relationship between you and your employer or employee, right? It can be the social contract. Seventh house is the relationship one-on-one and the contract, the commitment. It's the form. It's Libra, right? It is the scales. And so as one moves, the other will move in an opposite and equal way, right? And as we find balance. So Uranus is going to make waves in its stationing to go direct at this time. So while the full moon is happening, we're still in the full moon phase, there's going to be like, whoa, this upheaval or some sort of rapid change or some sort of like just a sense of unexpected maneuvering or shifting of the landscape of your career and the nature of the relationship of that public life, whatever that is, right? So that's on its way as well, while you have Mercury and Mars in a conjunction, which again, when they're transiting, this is, again, mental sharpness, decisiveness. I feel like that this, especially in Capricorn, in the sixth house, this is going to be one of those moments where you're going to really be able to handle this energy in a way that's like, you're just going to like, there's such a potential to just grab it, right? And have a rapid response time and really have this decisive, enthusiastic dexterity, whatever it is you're doing, especially around what it is you're doing every day. What is your day-to-day activity, your practices, your disciplines, your works, your labors. So the key to handling a Mars conjunct Mercury transit is to have self-awareness of this energy building up. And with Uranus stationing direct in another earth-based house, which is Taurus, in your 10th house, you're already going to feel the nervous and impulsive energy building. So apply this wherever you can, even if you don't have a cause that you are putting that energy into. And surely Capricorn is about ambition and goals. So if you don't have something in particular, find something to release this buildup of energy. Like, it doesn't matter, do a puzzle or something, right? Something that's definitive, that is a goal that you know that you can work towards accomplishing, because something is going to rapidly change. And you may find yourself like really having this focused mind and piercing intellect when it comes to those things in terms of what you're doing every day. This is really good, but it also can go very badly if you don't have an awareness of this nervous and impulsive energy, and people could get very hostile, right? And Leo people in particular, Leo rising people in particular, I feel like the hostility is tempered because the Mars-Mercury conjunction is in a house where it's like you just have to put your nose to the grindstone and grind it out, right? And that's a great place to put your energy when you don't have any control over the things happening in your public sphere, right? This is a way to take that energy and do something with it, okay? Now, the same day, speaking of squares, the Sun and Jupiter are also in a square, right? And Jupiter is also in the 10th house for Leo rising. Sun is your ruling body. It's in the 7th house that is ruled by Uranus. So there's a lot of change that's about to happen in terms of your public profile, your social contract, your relationships, and how it translates to, and your public life and how it translates to your one-on-one relationships. What are your contracts, right? So a Sun square Jupiter is like a double-edged sword. You can feel very confident, very proud, very optimistic. You can it's important that you express this because and how you express it, it's going to be very critical in terms of how what the result's going to be. So because it can range anywhere from really good fortune and success to loss and embarrassment, right? And it's going to go either. I think there's going to be very distinct people in each camp, right? And the best way to handle this transit is to show respect, moderation, and discipline. And again, it's that Mars, Mercury conjunction in your 6th house or in Capricorn that's really going to help with moderation, respect, and discipline. Don't take on too many projects, right? Focus your energy on just something that you can accomplish. Don't overdo it, right? These big changes and this expansive nature in the 10th house is very tempting to get caught up in, but this is saying, it's important to focus on what you can actually control and where you can focus your energy. So don't overdo it. You don't want to strain yourself. Also, in terms of Taurus, this does represent actual income and material resources and value. So you want to be conservative with your finances because you might accumulate things you don't need, for instance. And there's a tendency to overeat. There's a tendency to overindulge in things. Any kind of addictive demons, basically, like gambling and drugs and alcohol. When you have the sun, when Jupiter squares anything, the tendency to pivot back to the expansive nature of Jupiter is really high in the square. Good fortune may fall in your lap, but it's from doing your homework and working hard. There's the Mars Mercury conjunction again, working hard in terms of you working hard and having the mental kind of focus to do that. It's really going to help in this situation. Using moderation in all areas of life is best with your behavior and morals. And you just, have fun, but don't party too hard. Now, there is an awakening that is happening, and I know that that's overused at this point, but the particular degree that Jupiter's in your 10th house does represent this awakening by letting go of the past in order to see the future of where we're going. And there is an emergence, a brand new emergence that is in accordance with the rhythm of the cosmos here with the sun in Aquarius, that I feel like that the Leo person's going to be like, oh, now remember, 7 degrees Aquarius is opposite the Beehive cluster. This is the cosmic egg, right? And what is the cosmic egg? It's something brand new that comes out from the cosmos. It is not connected to the ancestry. It's not a lineage. It's something brand new. It's the cosmic egg, right? And again, the double-edged sword. It's okay to be optimistic and confident, but if you get too caught up in, especially with everything else happening around this time, you may overdo it, and that could work against you in the long run. Speaking of Uranus, now this is where I want to focus in particular for this, and there's more to focus on, and we'll do way more of that in the weekly. But one thing I do want to show you is that what you're going to see here is you have this Mercury-Mars conjunction, and then they each in turn are going to come into a trine with Uranus. Now, you can see that it's creating a grand trine down here with the moon and with Lilith, and in fact, it creates a kite. And a kite in astrology is exactly what it looks like. It's a kite. So you have an opposition that creates the spine of the kite, and then it's surrounded by all of these harmonious and stable connections. But it's that one opposition that gives the kite the structure in order to fly, right? So, but then it's surrounded by trines and sextiles, which are 120 degrees and 60 degree angles, right? And these are opportunities to transform, or they're just really stable and foundational. They're often very harmonious for the most part. They don't give a lot of tension or friction in order to grow. It's that opposition, which of course is going to be the moon and Neptune here in terms of your resources. But the thing I really want to point out here for the Leo people is that Mercury and Mars are each going to be in turn in a trine, 120 degree angle. So it's one of the angles of an equilateral triangle. Now, trines are very stable, but they can make people very lazy because they don't provide the impetus for change or growth, right? Well, with Uranus direct, I don't know how much that's going to be. So Mercury is going to trine Uranus, and then Mars is going to trine Uranus. And this is going to be coming into early next week, okay? So when Mercury is in a trine to Uranus, Mercury is your conscious mind. Uranus rules the collective conscious mind. It opens your mind to new possibilities. There may be some exciting news, chance encounters, it's stimulating, it's electrifying. Now we're talking about earth signs here, so this is very grounded too, and having to do with resources and the unfolding of resources. So keep an open mind. It comes naturally anyway with Mercury trine Uranus. And again, this is their sixth house, is how your works and labors translate to your career, and the 10th house. And so keep in mind that it is stimulating, it's electrifying, especially on your thinking and communication, right? Your senses are stimulated, your intuition is very solid, there are flashes of insight that are possible, right? And you may become more interested in a totally different type of subject or activity having to do with computers or technology or online communication, digital, whatever, because that's a very Uranian thing. Math, technical subjects, science, all of those things will fall under Uranus in terms of subjects. And this is a good time for puzzle solving, maybe even playing a game. But again, it's really that sixth house of your works and labors translating to a contribution to society is the stable connection here. And so there's, again, your senses are stimulated, intuition is really on point, and keeping your mind open to new possibilities is pretty awesome. Also, on the same day, you have Venus in a trine to Jupiter. So Venus in the same house is in a trine to the same house. And this is one of the best transits you're going to get. Venus trine Jupiter. Good cheer, optimism. This is one, like I said, it's one of the most looked forward to transits that you're going to get, is Venus trine Jupiter. And it's very interesting to those seeking love of any kind. Now, again, we're talking about resources. Venus does rule Taurus, by the way. So this is going to have a lot more to do, I think, especially for the Leo rising people, has a lot more to do with your works and labors and how it, again, translates to your contribution to society, your public profile. So this is a great time to kind of activate this in terms of what you individually are doing and how that translates into your public profile. And so it's very, like I said, very optimistic, a lot of good cheer, and what a great time to make investments to increase your wealth right now, especially when it comes to your public profile. So great. I mean, this is a very intense, this is the 28th into the 29th. And then Mars is in a trine to Uranus as well. So Sunday into Monday is like, whoa. And at this point, let's see here. I think we're still in, it's like we just came out of the full. So all of this is happening while the moon is still in its full moon phase. So whatever's being revealed, Leo, about you, the relativity of social values, right? The idea that you've taken a position and there's been a lot of bitterness and there's been a lot of dissonance there. And you start to realize, oh, it's not really about this particular costume that I'm wearing. It's about the way that it releases collective power in some way. And yes, there are factions that have been controlling that very deliberately. And that's something we have to keep in mind. But we also have the capacity, if we're aware, to do something different with that. And so then we get to Monday into Tuesday, and the moon turns to its disseminating phase, which is like the waning gibbous. It's when the message is being disseminated from the full moon, and the light of the moon is starting to wane. And this is kind of a difficult time because that revelatory feeling of like, oh, I see, I feel it all, is starting to wane, and we have to actually keep it up somehow, right? We have to take the message of the full moon. So let's see here. Let's look. Now, Mars is in a trine to Uranus, right? And we just talked about that. And what is that? Again, take some risks. Let your hair down. You're going to feel strong urge to break free of any previous restrictions or boring routines. Talk about routine, sixth house, right? You'll have many unique opportunities to experience new activities. New feelings, new relationships. Again, strong and accurate instincts. Need for freedom or self-expression will often with Mars, you're really projecting yourself out. And Mars in Capricorn, like I said, is exalted. It loves to be here. It loves to get something done. Mars in Capricorn is the Three of Pentacles. There's something actually palpable that you can say like, oh, this has been accomplished, and it gives you the impetus to keep going, right? So in a trine to Uranus that is like now just freshly direct, things, upending and changing, and something that pops up out of nowhere in terms of your public profile it's really going to be balanced, with Mars to like get you into a new activity or new space or new routine, right? And again, instincts, which is a very Mars thing, are strong and accurate. So you can take some calculated risks here that may really pay off. Other people are more likely to go along with the new you or be attracted to your new ideas when a Mars trine Uranus. And it's a great time for starting new projects with daring energy, right? And certainly the fighting spirit and the adrenaline will fade, so you have to be aware of that. But when you start it with this energy, it really just gets those projects to a place where it has its own momentum, right? And you don't have to keep tapping into that adrenaline as the initiative, right? And so this is again coming into Monday and Tuesday. It's really quite amazing. Like this weekend is just like so intense. And then things kind of drop off for a minute, and then we get to the 2nd of February, and that's where we have our third quarter moon. Now, third quarter moons are crisis in consciousness. They're ideological crises. They are those moments where all the idols start getting torn down, and we have to deal with this ideological crisis. And the moon will be in your 4th house, Leo. Speaking of Cancer, speaking of the 4th house, and a moon in the 4th house in Scorpio, no less, is very sensitive, very deep, feeling the feels very deeply, and your intuition and your own shadow, right, is something you're going to be really tapping into. And the square to the sun in Aquarius, which is about your social contract or your personal contracts, whatever they are, I feel like that's going to be, there is going to be a real ideological crisis in that moment, because as a sun ruled person, you're going to be like, let's just bypass all the shit and just get to the point here, right? Like this is just, it's like a train going through a tunnel, right? The tunnel had to be built, and it had to use like human skill and labor and the capacity to even create the tunnel in order to get there in the first place. And that's where I think a lot of the energy, but there'll be something nagging, something deep nagging in the place where your root system is, Leo. Something that is really drawing you into emotionally installing new connections in terms of your own root system, right? While you may be very openly and outwardly like, let's just get through the obstacles in terms of relationship, that moon in Scorpio, 14 degrees Scorpio, oh my gosh, the new connections, right? It's like your root system is going to have to start like branching off into different directions. And that, I think that's just going to be that nagging feeling there. And of course, the quarter moons are usually when the actual crisis happens, because they are squares. They're moons square the sun. And so just, it'll be this incredible weekend. And then coming into next week, we're going to hit that wall by next Friday, right? There will be this kind of like, what do I do here? Or not even what do I do? Like just being the ideological crisis and the thing is like, as you come to realize the relativity of the social values that you may have completely over-identified with, there is going to be a need to emotionally establish new connections in terms of your family, in terms of whoever and whatever groups you identify that you belong to, whether that's a nation, whether it's a tribe, a clan, whatever your family represents to you. This will be kind of that feeling of like, it's going to be really important. It's one thing to be, focused on the nature of the social contract and the relationship, right? But without that strong root system and those connections, it's not going to matter. And that's going to be the crisis in that moment by the time we get to next weekend. And that doesn't have to be a crisis if you're already aware of the fact that it's going to be important to at least acknowledge deep, intuitively, emotionally, even subconsciously, I'm going to install new connections here if I want to be able to have the capacity to really bypass some things in relationship, or like, get past something that otherwise would have been an obstacle, just like a tunnel through a mountain, right? Now, Mercury is going to enter Aquarius on the 5th, which is your seventh house. And when Mercury is in Aquarius, or I'm sorry, when Mercury is in the seventh house, you learn a lot more from your relationships than you do from any other type of source. And it will be conjunct Pluto, no less. And that adds depth and intensity to your thinking and communication. It's a great time to get to the bottom of troubling issues. Oh, that's very interesting. Maybe you should reflect back on that third quarter moon in Scorpio that's like, maybe I should establish some new connections down here into the root of who I am. Because when Mercury and Pluto conjunct in Aquarius, in your seventh house, you're going to really want to get to the bottom of some troubling issues in your relationship. You can uncover secrets through study and research or through probing and questioning others. Boy, there's going to be a lot. I mean, the pressure is already on with people who have been deployed as influencers. It's going to get that much more intense with this particular transit. You can uncover secrets, and like I said, through study and research or through probing and questioning others, and you can gain a thorough understanding of things that otherwise would have been a mystery. And again, there's that moon in Scorpio. Psychological self-analysis is something you could do, like really, really questioning yourself and looking at yourself in the mirror. And this would be a really great time to visit a counselor or somebody you really trust in terms of being able to reflect back to you, and certainly to gain a greater understanding of the dynamics of the relationships you're involved in. This is going to be a big part of this. And the thing is, the downside to Mercury conjunct Pluto like this is that you can use your powers to deceive other people. And there's such a great power of persuasion and influence. You're going to see that uptick happen, right? The next installment, you know what I mean, is going to come with Mercury conjunct Pluto, right? How do we continue to keep people locked into the deception as they are finding out like what's going on? So just be aware of that, right? And likely you're going to be, especially Leo, more interested in serious subjects and become involved in the darker side of life, right? And power struggles are certainly a big issue with Mercury conjunct Pluto, and things can get very intense. And it is possible to make profound discoveries during this transit, though, and you may discover something very revealing about yourself from deep within your soul. And I think this is really what it comes down to for all of us, but especially for the Leo people. This is going to be a big part of this, I think. Let's see here. And then the last of the Venus is going to trine Uranus, and then the sun is going to square Uranus. Boy, what a capstone to the end of this lunar cycle, I have to be honest here. So, here comes Venus coming into her trine with Uranus, right? So you can see here Venus and Capricorn coming into a trine with Uranus, like between the 7th and 8th of February. And that, again, those trines are very stable. Venus does rule Taurus. So, it's going to give you the urge to try something new that can apply to all areas of life. But of course, this is going to apply to your works and labors, really. Devoting yourself to a boring routine may be difficult as you're easily distracted by anything new and shiny. And that is definitely going to be taken advantage of as well. So especially if you're really got a wandering eye, or you really need to satisfy something new, that urge to try something new. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying that you're going to feel that. Expect the unexpected, even with routine activities with a Venus trine Uranus. And I think if you can keep that in mind, I feel like that'll be very useful, because then the sun is going to square Uranus. The sun in Aquarius is going to square Uranus, leading up to not only the next new moon, but the beginning of the Chinese New Year, which is the year of the dragon. So this is, and I'm going to talk about that just so briefly here before we move on. But the sun is going to square Uranus right at the balsamic moon, the very end of the moon phase. And this requires open-mindedness and flexibility, because you're entering a stage of uncertainty. And there's a lot of uneasiness and anxiety that comes along with the sun square Uranus. But you may be subject to radical change in your environment or anything unexpected from other people. Outbursts of anger will show a scary and unexpected side of your nature if the transit gets the better of you. The ego is very strong. I would argue that it's not, because it's in Aquarius, but for the Leo people, no matter what, you are sun ruled, so your ego is always very strong. Your ego is just going to be strong in connection to the collective consciousness that is shaping your relationships and who you are in relationships. So ego conflicts are very possible right now with this type of square, and arguments could lead to a loss of face, unexpected consequences, all of these things, right? Now, where is the sun when it squares Uranus? 20 degrees Aquarius, a large white dove bearing a message, the answer of spiritual agencies to thorough, sustained, and victorious individual efforts, right? That sounds pretty good, actually, right? That you get this message, but in the messaging is where the unpredictable behavior could surface, right? Especially when it comes to being identified with the form of your relationships and your contracts, and Uranus continuing to make change in your public profile as well. And I think that's where you're going to get the conflict more than anything else, is the change or the awareness of the spiritual agencies in terms of your relationships and you, right? And the way that it is challenged by the rapid and unexpected change in your public profile. So there is so much change that is coming for all of us. And Leo, boy, all I'm going to say is thank you. Thank you, because you are going to represent, you really are going to represent the fullness of what that means at the individual level, or the subjective level, because it's going to be the change in you as a person, how you identify yourself, how you feel on the inside, that is really going to be the model for how all of this is happening. So with that being said, I just want to share a couple of things just so you have an idea of what I have to offer. If in fact this is your first time here, or you've been considering, what do I get with my $5 a month? Well, I will say that you can go to the link in the description box below in order to access Subscribestar and see what is available for the $5 a month and the $9 a month. But I will say that right now, all tiers, you have access to 10% off, 10% discount on all my services on my website. You have access to a private Telegram chat group, and the link is in Subscribestar when you do actually subscribe. You have access to a monthly group call and the replay that we do every month. It's an open forum. There's no real format, and it's just for people to get together and share, and some really good conversation comes out of that. And so that's available. Now for Tier 2, which is the Starseed Fellowship Plus, you also get access to weekly astrology reports. And you also are going to have access from here on out any special astrology reports that I do. One of which actually I'm going to share with you right now is that I'm going to be doing a special report about the year of the Wood Dragon, which begins with the next new moon in Aquarius, which is going to be on the 9th of February. And the Chinese New Year is celebrated between the second new moon after the solstice up to the full moon. The full moon in Virgo will be conjunct Alpha Draconis, which is why we're going to talk about Draco starseeds. And of course, it is the year of the dragon. So if you're interested in that special report, you may want to consider subscribing at least at the $5 level, which is Tier 2. You also have access to all of the Catalyst Classroom material up to this point. And an example of that actually is a series, my most recent series, which is called Defense Against the Dark Arts. And I did 3 presentations about biochemistry, about sound and cymatics. And then the one that is publicly available is called The Technology of Witchcraft and Wizardry, or the Wireless Body Area Network. And so those are the types of presentations the Catalyst Classroom has done for the Catalyst Classroom in the past. And here, we take this away. So that's just an idea. And so all of that and all of my past Catalyst Classroom presentations and all of the all of the materials that go along with it, they're all available now for the tier 2 subscribers on Subscribestar. So that is available, as well as, like I said, this is upcoming, that I'm going to do the Year of the Wood Dragon. That's going to be a special astrology report, only available to people who are subscribed through Subscribestar. And then you have access to all of the Catalyst Classroom material. Now, the folks who are actually subscribed to tier 3, that is $9 a month, and you get all of this stuff, and at this point also a complimentary service every month of subscription, which includes either a micro reading, so an astrology reading or some other type of intuitive reading, a 30-minute distance Reiki session, or a one-on-one consultation, like a 15-20 minute one-on-one like video call. That is available to tier 3 subscribers every month that you're subscribed. You have access to that, plus all of the other benefits. So if you are interested, like I said, you can email me directly. You can visit Subscribestar at the link in the description box below. You can certainly check out my website, also linked in the description box, and that'll give you some idea of my services. And that's really the landing pad for everything, is the website. So my friends, I am losing my voice as we speak here, so I'm gonna bring this to a conclusion here. Leo, thank you for being here. I truly appreciate you very much, and everyone else that's here. If you're not a Leo but you're still here, I appreciate you very much. Thank you for being here. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment, or certainly to email me at catalystenergies@gmail.com. I will see you on the next video, which will be the new moon in Aquarius. Leo, I would recommend that even though it's not your sign, you can't get away from Aquarius because it's opposite your sign. So I would recommend keeping an eye out for that as well. I also have an email list that you can access through the homepage of my website, and that'll have much more detail about how to access all of the subscriber content. And if you're not on social media, it's a great way to kind of know what's going on in between when I'm posting public videos and content. So thank you very much. I really appreciate all of you being here, and I enjoy the full moon, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Take care.